From the WNIN Tri-State Public Media Center in downtown Evansville, I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street. Our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, a prolific storyteller, learning and listening to tales from family, friends, and passersby while growing up in southern Indiana. From the fence post to the fireside, young Abe absorbed the skills of spinning a good yarn. Historians say Lincoln enjoyed telling stories and jokes throughout his life. Historians say he fought his melancholy and depression by sharing a good laugh. Lincoln liked the account of Ethan Allen's visit to England after the Revolutionary War. Some Brits taunted the war hero, saying redcoats hung a portrait of George Washington in the outhouse. Well, Lincoln recalled it was Ethan Allen who got the last laugh, saying nothing could make a Brit poop quicker than the sight of General Washington. Okay, love that Lincoln story. Of course, Lincoln also was a dad, father of 4 boys. Among his quotes about children, teach the children so it will not be necessary to teach the adults. A child is a person who is going to carry on what we have started. The fate of humanity is in our children's hands. Tradition of Hoosier storytelling lives on, and Storytelling Arts of Indiana is a nonprofit that promotes the art of storytelling by creating opportunities to showcase these talented performers who both entertain and inspire us. My guest is author, songwriter, early childhood educator, and storyteller, Mary Jo Huff. So welcome to 2 Main Street, Mary Jo. And I understand you always travel with a peeper in your pocket. Is that correct?
Always have a peeper in my pocket.
So what is a peeper?
A peeper is a little set of eyeballs that you can put on your finger. I use my tall man finger, and I put them on there, and your hand becomes a puppet automatically. So when you put those on, it doesn't even matter if it's adults. They'll look at you like, oh, what is that? And they'll ask, and then it opens the door for you to say, oh, my gosh, I'm a peeper. Let me tell you a little story. And children are fascinated by that hand puppet like you're not even connected to it.
So you grab their attention right away.
Right away.
And that's the key, isn't it?
That's the key.
You got to start off right. Okay. Now, storytelling, you say with a snap, clap, wiggle, and giggle. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do. I have a CD. I have several CDs, but my last CD is called Snap, Clap, Wiggle, and Giggle. And in the early childhood world, probably CDs will go by the wayside because now they can get on CD Baby, they can get on Spotify and all those places, iTunes, and get a song and pick the song they want for 99 cents versus buying a CD. But these were put together for early childhood educators. The CD is full of just fun, bouncy things to do. And I recorded that with a young lady who's a professor at Austin Peay University in Clarksville, Tennessee, who's now moving to Nashville to work at a different university. So her background and mine have crossed for many years, but I'm her mama's age. And so we did this with just a passion. And we spread the word about that, across the United States.
Mm-hmm. Now, you take this show on the road. I know you've been to many states and workshops, conferences. So what's your travel schedule like?
Well, now I've become a virtual queen. It's like I have some contracts in 2022, but in those contracts is a column that if they have to go virtual, I'm prepared to go virtual. Mm-hmm. And so my January conference in Texas, which I've gone to for many years, it's just gone virtual. Mm-hmm. So that means that I changed things a little bit, And
how do you rework that act?
Well, I have an office that has puppets in the background. I bought one of those, put them up on the thing behind you so you look intelligent. Well, it didn't work. I didn't look very good. And they were hard to put up and took a lot of time. So one day I looked in my office and I thought, this is me. The colors, the books, I have shelves of books and a puppet tree behind me. And so I don't apologize for that anymore. People that know me that's what it is. I love color. And so I use that office when I do virtual. I have a camera up on my computer I tried the laptop, but when people do the laptop, it's sitting down, and sometimes all you see is their nostrils when their mouth moves. It's kind of a little scary sometimes. So I bought a camera and put it on top of my computer. Even though I'm an older person, I have two big screens on my desk and a fast computer down there on the floor that a wonderful man in Newburgh takes care of and keeps me running all the time. So that camera scans the whole room. And I make sure everything is accessible, that I can put my hand on it to the right, my hand on it to the left, or if it's on the floor, I can pick it up. And most of the time, those workshops are anywhere from 1 hour to 6 hours. 6 hours has a lunch break. And we're getting ready to do a 2-hour in Lubbock, Texas. And my friend in Tennessee will be on the screen. I will be on the screen. And we won't be anywhere near each other. But we can pull that off. We did a put together last night, and then we'll do a practice, and we'll run it tight. And it's for 2 hours.
Who's the audience?
Well, this audience will be early childhood educators in Lubbock, Texas. In January, there'll be early childhood educators in Harris County, and it's near Pearland, Texas, which is south of Houston. And then we go to West Virginia, and I have some other contracts that are sitting there waiting for me to decide, can I do that?
So they're going to take some information from you and bring it to their classrooms?
Yes.
Is that the plan?
We hope that they take, the one we're doing in Lubbock will be all about books. And it's a poll. We put up 3 books that we love, that we know work with kids. And in doing that, we explain why that book is important. And we touch through anything that we know is good in early childhood, like bears and gardens. And each section has 3 books in it. And we read 5 books in that 2 hours, that's all. And so, because the rest of the time we're explaining, and then we put activities that they can do with those books so that these early childhood people can go to the library and get that book. It's free. Get a library card, people. Quit telling me how expensive books are. The librarians love for you to call and say, my librarian, Miss Linda in Newburgh, I'll say, Linda, I need 10 books. I'm going to send you a list, and I'll send her a list. And she might say, we only have 6, but I can get them from the lending library. It'll take a couple days. So you have to be ahead of the game. You can't wait till the day you want it. Mm-hmm. And it's an awesome thing to work with a librarian. And for the kids to know that that's a library book. We had a basket at our center. I had a center several years ago. I've retired. And we had 115 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. So you better be on the ball because they could be in charge real quick. So you had to stay ahead of them. And I found that reading wonderful books with those kids led to telling a wonderful story. So sometimes I would read, sometimes I would tell. And I actually started doing that because one day I was reading The Little Old Lady Who Wasn't Afraid of Anything by Linda Williams. I'd read it I don't know how many times. And for some reason, I put the book down and I finished the story. And the difference in the children's attention when my body language showed that story was amazing. That was the first story that I just told without any book in my hand.
Is that when the light bulb went off?
That's it. It was like, yes. And I had a hat on that day. I always wore a hat at story time. I just have a straw hat, and I buy those rings at the craft store. When they're 75% off, you can get a fall ring, a spring ring, a summer ring, a winter ring, and just drop it over that hat. And it changes the whole vision, and I did it seasonally. And so that's how I put things together. I tell people that you don't have to do it by the month, by the week, by the day. Do it seasonally so you're free to reach in that suitcase or that basket and pull out what you need at that given day. And so when I told that story, I thought, boy, the next year I'm going to tell that on my flannel board. And I had a storytelling apron that I developed here in Evansville, Indiana. And it's now sold all around the world. I don't sell it anymore. It was too much for me to deal with all that stuff, that selling and buying and all that. And so the big catalogs have those things now, and I just refer people to those. But I've worked in 47 states and 3 countries telling stories, and if it wasn't for COVID, I'd have knocked off those other states. I already had flights to 2 of them and had to get that all canceled. So my goal is to be able to get to Montana and to get to Hawaii and to get to Idaho. Those are my 3 that are left.
Those are holdouts. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you a native of this area, Mary Jo?
Born and raised here, raised in Darmstadt, married a boy from here, and we have 3 children. And he was in the United States Marine Corps. So that was a shock to me because I lived in the middle of the United States of America.
Your husband was in the Marine Corps?
He was in the Marine Corps. And so we traveled a little bit those 4 years. In fact, we moved 11 times in 4 years.
Oh, my.
And had 3 children in 4 years. You know, I was a good Catholic girl. I had those 3 children. And it was like, okay, God, you've put this on my plate. We've got to go a different direction. And because of Vietnam, he had been in Vietnam one session, 13 months, and assumed if he signed over, we would stay in the States. And we found out that wasn't true. He would have been shipped out within 2 months. So we got out of the Marine Corps and came home and bounced here and there a little bit. My mom and dad lived here. My sister lived here, and my brother lived here. And so it was home. And I've never found another place I wanted to live. I love to go to the mountains. My children know that I go to the beach a lot, but I'm not a sand person, so I don't care if I'm down there in the sand or not. But those mountains, sitting by those creeks, rumbling through those mountains, you can go there and write, too. Mm-hmm. I've actually rented a cabin there and stayed 1 week and wrote a book. So it's a peaceful place. Mm-hmm. But Evansville's home. But I'm in Newburgh. You know, the people on the west side, I went to school at Mater Dei, and the people on the west side, when I first told them where I was going to live, said, oh, my gosh, we'll have to pack a lunch to get there. And I still laugh about that because...
You need a passport.
Yes. And so now, you know, they get on the Lloyd, and if they get rid of the few lights that are still on the Lloyd, because I've told you how many states I've been in. I've driven in the worst traffic in Texas, in my opinion. I've been to L.A., and I've driven in that traffic, too, and we don't miss that by much with our stoplights here. You just stop, and you think that person in front of you needs to go, but they haven't pushed on the accelerator yet because they're looking at their phone. So, you know.
Pet peeve there, Dad.
Yeah.
So where did you get your education besides Mater Dei?
Oh, I went to the University of Evansville. Actually, I went to school for almost 3 years to be a radiological technologist, and I got that little pin. I worked at Welborn Clinic, and it was kind of an on-the-job training there. You were just thrown into a dark room immediately and learned how to dip those old films. So when I go in now, I see the computers they get to use, and you know, there's your leg up on the screen already. I'm amazed.
Oh yeah,
but after having my 3 children, to go back to work full time was not in my wheelhouse. I stayed home with the kids. I didn't find anything that was more important to me. So I had many jobs. Paid my dues, though, as a rad tech for 30 years. I paid those dues. And I did the training that you had to do to keep that little pin. And it actually paid off. I graduated from Mater Dei, then went to USI and got my early childhood degree at USI. But that was after the kids were out of school. In fact, my son was in college. My oldest daughter was in college. The other one was in high school. And I thought, I'm going to go back and take some of those courses. And bam, 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 bam. Since I owned a center and was grandfathered in, I already knew all the stuff they wanted us to know. So I felt very comfortable doing that and had some wonderful, wonderful professors. We had lots of fun. And they liked to pick on me because I was an alternative student. That means I was older.
Oh, is that what they call them now?
Alternative student,
there
yes.
You go. Now, obviously you read to your children?
Read to my children. They all had library cards early. They each had their own bag. And yes, I took them to the library every week for story time. When it was down on the river, the Newburgh Library was down on the river then. And it was just part of our whole system at our house. And when they became good readers, then they picked their own books, and they each got to pick 5 books each time that we went. And they had their bags, had to keep them in their bags so we didn't get mixed up in the household. And, you know, I have 8 grandkids and 1 great-grandson. And every one of them get a book every year. And my youngest up in Indianapolis, he's 10. Here's what he do. He'll call me because he doesn't have a phone to text me yet. He'll say, they call me Dodie. Grandma Dodie, I found a book. I'll say, okay, give it to me. Yeah, but there's 3 of them, Grandma Dodie. You got enough credit card money to get 3 of them? I'll say, yep, and I'll have them delivered. And I love it because they know if there's one thing I will do for them, it is order a book. And they're prolific readers. They're awesome kids and awesome students. So it has paid off. And the great-grandson at my house, when he comes, the book fairy came. So there's always books for him to take home. He gets to keep them. But then I found out if I put 8 books up on the table and he can only pick 2, it is a half an hour. He goes around the table and he touches them and he looks at them and he can't decide. And he'll say, could I please have 3? I'll say, no, just 2. Oh. And it's hard for me. I have to turn my back because I want to laugh. But you know what? He finally picks out whatever 2 he wants to take home. Yeah. So it's fun when he walks in the door because he knows, has the book fairy been here? I'll say, yep, the basket's over there.
Now, as an educator, have you noticed the impact of COVID-19 on early child education?
Well, I think the restrictions that the caregivers have and that the teachers have with the kids is hard because wearing a mask and not being able to see a facial expression when you're speaking or when you're talking, I think that's very hard for the kids. I don't know if the masks have really bothered them or not because they put their mask on and go to the grocery. They put their mask on and they go wherever mom's going to go. They go to Chuck E. Cheese, put it on, go in, take it off. I think for them, it's just part of their life. You know, when they don't have to do that, if that comes in our world, and that'll be a surprise to them. I think learning has changed so much because people rely so much on electronics. And I love electronics, don't get me wrong. I love it all. I have a smartphone down here. It's got 6 camera holes on the back. I only know how to use 3 of them right now, but I'll learn the other 2. There's an advantage for that sometimes, like on whiteboards. They can actually push a button and pull up a book and read that book, and the page turns on the whiteboard. But it's not the same unless they put a book in their hands and they turn that book. For example, Chicks Go Wild, I read this weekend to my great-grandson. And when you got ready to turn the page, it says, Chicks Go Wild. He got so excited. So when I got all done, he said, read it again. I said, well, Grandma has to do something first. And I just turned and walked away, and I watched him. He opened that book and went, Chicks Go Wild. And he can't read. He can't read words yet. Then he turned the rest of the pages till he found another page that said, Chicks Go Wild, Run Wild, I think it is. So I don't want people to lose that one-on-one personality between you and the kids. And I want them to anticipate what you're going to do next. It's hard to say sometimes to the new generation, you better be one step ahead of those kids, because if you're not, they're going to get ahead of you.
That's right.
Because they're very smart today. They're smart always, but there's a different kinds of smart today. These kids can get a phone, and they can get on that phone and do things at a very young age. So yeah, it has to affect families and kids, and our whole world's affected. So,
now tell me about Storytelling Indiana. It sounds like a very interesting group of folks. Who belongs to this group?
Well, Story Arts of Indiana is handled by a lady named Ellen Munns. She's the director there, and it's actually national and international. They bring tellers into the Indianapolis area. That once a month there's a new teller that comes in, and there's some famous storytellers. Donald Davis is probably one of the oldest, smartest, most famous storytellers, and Bill Lepp, he's funny. He's out of West Virginia, and he's an old preacher guy, and he just lays you on the floor. And there are people that I've actually gotten in my car with a friend and driven up there and listened to, and came back home since '69 is in, and there are new tellers all over, but Story Arts of Indiana keeps storytelling alive in the state of Indiana. And very important. Almost every state has a liaison, and they moved from Jonesboro, Tennessee to Kansas City, Missouri. And now the main storytelling hub is out of Kansas City, Missouri. And it was difficult for them to make that move, but they did. And we support them in that. They have a conference every year, which is powerful. There is a professor, Margaret Reed McDonald, Dr. Margaret Reed McDonald, from North Vernon, Indiana. Mm-hmm. And so we became buddies because of our Indiana connection. But she lived most of her life in the state of Washington, and she is a famous folklorist with a degree from Indiana University. And she says that very proudly. She has told stories in more countries than anybody I know. And just a sweet, sweet, fun lady. Anytime she's telling, Mary Jo will sit there and listen to her.
So you pick up some tips when you listen to these famous storytellers?
Oh, absolutely. You get body language. You get outfits. Some of them wear wild outfits, and some of them are very plain kind of things. You just see their stage presence. You see how they can move with a mic. Mm-hmm. I don't use a hand mic because I'm too active, and I have to have a lavalier for me to get anything done because I'm busy. Mm-hmm. I'm always busy with stuff. So,
and you appeal to audiences of all ages. A recent example: the trip to the Indiana History Center, where you premiered 50-yard line Mama in row 20, a football mom watching her son play for the Indiana Hoosiers. And, of course, Bill Mallory was the coach of the Hoosiers from 1984 to 1996, the late Bill Mallory. I guess he was a featured protagonist in this presentation.
Yeah, kind of. A big part.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about the 50-yard line Mama.
Well, when I was accepted to do a story in Indianapolis for the Story Arts, it is funded by a gentleman who, it has to be a story from Indiana. And they want something that is real. Well, I have a lot of stories from Indiana that are real. From, driving a boat on the Ohio River and not really knowing how to drive it, and police were looking for me, and I had to hide that boat because I didn't know what I was doing. To lots of stories, but this one was close to my heart, and so I sent it up there. 50-yard line Mama, row 20, best seat in the house. I didn't know that people didn't know about football. I watch football on Saturday and Sunday. I watch it when I'm cooking. We have it on 2 TVs because I know what they're doing on the field. And most of my friends that we were acquainted with for all those years, they also knew about football. So 50-yard line Mama came about because my son was a walk-on at IU. It was Bill Mallory's first year. They had every accolade they could have for him about him coming on board and what he was going to do for the Hoosiers. And the first year we were 0-11. So there are people, including our family, wondering, what are we doing here?
Well, he came to IU from, Colorado?
Well, he'd been in Illinois, he'd been in Colorado, mm-hmm. And we went to many schools that had contacted Joe his senior year. We didn't expect to have to go hunting, but the ball got dropped. I'll be gentle with that. The ball got dropped, and we didn't drop it. So we decided, Joe did, that he said, I'm going to play football somewhere. I said, okay, well, where are we going to do that? So we hauled off to the UK. Nice people met us there, sat me in a chair, took him off. When they came back, they said, we're really surprised that Joe is as big as he is and as fast as he is. We were told he couldn't play at this level. Well, that fired me up just a little bit.
Got Mama mad.
Yeah. Got me determined, probably more than anything else. So then we went to Murray State. That's where we went next. Nice people down there, too. In fact, he told me to go over and sign Joe up. UK had me to go sign Joe up, and I wrote a check at both those schools. Now, my husband worked in a factory, and writing those checks was not a smart thing to do because I was going to have to go get a loan for 90 days down at Marsplan. Marsplan's gone, but I got that loan for 90 days, same as cash. And so we came home, and Joe said, Mom, I don't want to go down there. But my parents had a camp at Barkley Lake, and I thought, oh, how cool. We could just stay at the camp, but that didn't work. And then a D2 school did come to our house and offered him a full ride. But that coach said to him before he left, I would love to have you on my roster. I've watched you play, but you can play better than what I can offer you. Didn't sign those papers. Then we went to Ohio State because Joe had been to camp there, and they had contacted us a couple of times. They'd contacted the school too. So we get in the car, and in this story, I had an old yellow Mercury that I had to put oil behind my seat because it burned oil all the time. We went to Ohio State. Again, write a check, get that boy registered. We want him over here as a walk-on. Nobody had any scholarships left by the time we did this in June. They already popped those scholarships early on. So on the way home, Joe says to me, I think I'd like to go to IU. Well, I screamed at him, what do you mean? We've gone to all these schools and you can't decide what you want to do. I said, you're going to have to contact him. He did. Monday, called him. They said, come up on Wednesday. So we did. Now, we'd never been to a big college except the ones we drove to on this little run. And so we got to IU and parked on the west side of Assembly Hall, and we walked up the steps. And when we went in the door, there was a man coming at us, and he said, can I help you? And Joe said, I'm here to see Coach Bill Mallory. He said, well, here, boy. Stuck his hand out and shook his hand. And then he shook my hand. And I'm very particular about the way people shake my hand and the way I shake back. And that was a special handshake. So anyway, he took us on a tour of the campus in a little white snub-nosed bus. And there were two other kids and parents there. And we rode in this bus, and they went around telling us what the buildings were and all this. And then they stopped. There was a football scrimmage up on the hill. And when they stopped, the parents all got out of the bus, and so did the kids. And I thought, I am not going to walk up that hill. And so I said, it's okay, I'll wait right here. And I did wait. But when they came back, this daddy got on the bus. And in the story, I tell you all about the breeches he had on, because they were the loudest plaid pants with yellow stripes I've ever seen. And he gets back on the bus, and he said, are you Mrs. Huff? And I said, yes. Well, how did that coach up there know Joe? I said, well, I don't know. I wasn't up there. I didn't know who it was. I said, ask him when he comes back. He did. And Joe said, all right, he knew me because we played them and we beat them. And that's how he remembered me. And the man just looked at him, then he looked at me, and he put his head down. He never said another word to us on that little trip. Well, Coach had told us that we were going to go across to the football stadium and meet Coach Andy Kincannon, who was, still is a friend, a good friend. And we went down those big steps. It was like they went down 2 blocks. I had to hold on to the rail. And we got there, and the little girl showed us down to Kincannon's office. He shook Joe's hand. He shook my hand. And he had the longest fingers. His hand wrapped around my wrist. And he had a beautiful, beautiful smile. And he was an Afro-American man, and that smile took up his whole face. And we sat down, and they talked, and I can tell you to this day, I don't even know what they talked about because I didn't understand a lot of it. And at the end, he said, Joe, look at that chart right there on my wall. Where do you think you can play on that chart? And Joe stood up and put his finger there, and he said, I can play right there. That coach laughed so hard, I'll tell you, I thought he was going to come out of his chair. He was just laughing and laughing. He said, you think you can play Apache for IU? He said, you're too skinny. Joe looked at him and said, but I'm fast. And so he stood up and he said, I'll talk to Coach Mallory and talk this over, and we'll let you know. He didn't have me write a check. He didn't offer him to be a walk-on. And I thought, well, this was a bust. We're going to be going to Ohio State. We went home, and 3 days later, there was a letter came in the mail, and Coach Bill Mallory's return address was in the upper left-hand corner. I wanted to open that thing so bad. It laid there for about 4 hours, and it was killing me not to steam it open. I know how to do that, but I didn't. I left it there. And Joe opened it, and they offered him to come as a preferred walk-on. There were no scholarships left. He said, that's where I'm going to go to school. I said, okay. So then a letter came and told us what day he had to be there, told us what to bring, et cetera, et cetera. So we go up there. And that's where Brewster's Ice Cream is today in Bloomington. There was a hotel there with a big restaurant, and that's where they housed the freshmen when they came in. So we delivered our kids, and there were lots of parents there. But see, he wasn't recruited, so I didn't know anybody. these mamas were a boo-hooing and a crying in the parking lot and a holding on to these kids, and I thought, goodness gracious. That wasn't my way of doing things. I was tickled to death he's going to get an education. So we did all the things we had to do, and then we went to drop him off at the restaurant and went in the door, and there was a little alcove, and Bill Mallory was standing there. Slapped Joe on the back and said, glad you're here, boy. And he turned around and shook my hand, and he gave me that shake again. And this is the true story. I turned his hand over, and I said, you take care of my boy, or I'll take him to Ohio State. Now, I had no idea that he had been at Ohio State as a coach, and he had an avid desire to beat them. I had no clue. So for many years, he told that story in the Big Ten Network, all over the Big Ten Network. I was asked one time if it bothered me. I said, nope. If it helps him get a recruit, nope, I don't care.
Now, Mary Jo Huff is my guest here on 2 Main Street. Where'd your son play high school ball?
Castle.
Played at Castle.
He played in 1982 when they were the state champs and beat Hobart. And I was told, after I told that story, I got an email that they didn't call it Hobart, they called it Hobart. Well, it's spelled Hobart. So down here we called it Hobart. It might be Hobart up north, but it's Hobart down here.
So he had the credentials, definitely. A state champion, well known across Indiana, playing at IU. Bill Mallory, of course, he's been kind of like a compliment to Bob Knight. I've heard him described that way because Bob Knight, of course, Bob Knight is Bob Knight.
Bob Knight's
But
Bob Knight.
Mallory was a bigger-than-life character, too.
Very much so.
He walked into a room, everybody knew he was there, definitely. He was the winningest coach, I think, at IU, football coach. Went to 6 bowl games. Now, when
I interview myself.
Yeah, your son was there. He had a good career, I guess, at IU?
He had a wonderful career at IU. And, talking about Bill Mallory, the one thing I think about him all the time is lock your jaw. And I say that sometimes, and I think about him. He's gone now, but a big influence in our lives and the lives of probably most of the kids that played for him. In Joe's there 5 years. He had a leg break in his sophomore year. A guy from Navy landed on him, but they dressed him the rest of those games with that spiral fracture. And at Michigan, which was 106 people in a stadium, and believe me, we don't get to sit on the 50-yard line. We're stuck down on that 5-yard line. And he told me, Mom, take your binoculars. If I take my tape off of my hands at halftime, you'll know I got my 5th year. So, boy, I had them binoculars out, and he came and he moved to the end, and he put his hands up, and he took the tape off of his hands, and I knew we had a 5th year. And he didn't play after that. In fact, I had to go to Ohio State and scab me a ticket out of the parking lot to get in the game because he couldn't dress for that game. It was his group beat all Big Ten schools in their time there. They're the only football team that's ever done that.
Wow.
And so they brag on that all the time.
Sure.
I think one of the things that hangs really tight with me is when those boys, they're called Mal's men, when those boys will get together and they do in a group where they lean over and they sing, Indiana, 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 we're all for you. It's just, I have goosebumps right now. Mm-hmm. That will never, ever leave their lives. And so, yep, he was important.
Now, your talk to this group, the Indiana History Center group, how was it received, the 50-yard line, Mama Row 20?
My compliments that have come back, the gentleman that sponsors that scholarship there has sent me a couple of emails with comments from people. It probably was a very different kind of story than they normally do, but the rapport that I've gotten with people that were there and the compliments have been good. And so I will have that story will be written, and they actually published the stories from this year through the Indiana Storytelling Arts. It's a big deal to get to do that. I've been doing this a long time with 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and not just them, but with the people that work with them. That's who I like to get to. I like to get to their gut, Mm-hmm. So this for me was a change, and I did it in 4 quarters. And so each quarter's 15 minutes. But the last quarter on a real football game can be 2 hours. And so I promised them I would be 15 minutes. And I have something in front of me. This is the necklace. You see this?
Mm-hmm.
Many people from our time there have this necklace. I knew no one. So when I was talking to somebody, I didn't know if it was a coach's wife and I would say something wrong. I didn't know if they were on offense or defense. So when I made this, the coaches' wives had cream-colored strings, and the defense had red, and the offense had maroon. So when I gave these out free, I took them in Ziploc bags and put them up. I knew who I was talking to. Offense, coaches' wives.
Oh.
But you see, I cut these out with a bandsaw. And then I cut out a football and a helmet right there. So we started out with 3 pieces. And then when we beat Purdue 52-7, I had to make a Purdue bucket. Then I needed to balance it, so I did a stadium. Then these are 2 of our bowl games, the All-American Bowl and the Peach Bowl. And then this was Joe's last game, the Liberty Bowl. But he was MVP of the Liberty Bowl and for the football team that year. And then these were 2 other bowl games that I got to go to because Bill Mallory said I could come. No, my son didn't play in those, but Bill Mallory said I could come, so I went.
Now, you're sitting on the 50-yard line in this presentation. Highs and lows, did you talk about those?
Well,
mostly highs?
When you lose a game, that's a low. And that first season, 0-11, that's a low.
So that was a tough season for you sitting on the 50-yard line.
Very tough, but you know what? We beat Ohio State at Ohio State. You know what the headline was the next day? The darkest day. And actually, a little tiny story. I was many years later in Columbus for an early childhood thing, and we were at a little restaurant, a German restaurant, and we heard a radio show. Well, I went around the corner, and it was the radio show before the IU-Ohio State game that Saturday. This was Friday. And I stood there for a minute, and I listened, and they were just jabbering back and forth. And when they took a break, I said, but there was the darkest day. Well, this man came down off of that little podium he was at, and he said, how'd you know that? I said, 'cause number 35 was there. He said, Jo Huff. I said, how'd you know? He said, I'm forgetting. And so things like that are just, and Michigan, Michigan was at IU. We'd not beat Michigan. Bill Mallory's kids went to Michigan, but we didn't beat Michigan. And going up there and sitting in that huge stadium, IU's not that big. But that night, it was pouring down rain. It was dark outside. They turned on the lights for the first time at the IU Stadium. And we were ahead of Michigan. And Joe got that quarterback 3 times and pulled that towel off that quarterback's belt, and he waved it in the air. I can still see it. Mallory used it for recruiting for many years. And today he'd get a penalty, I'm sure. But, then it was like, and we beat Michigan on our own turf. And, tailgating was friends just got together. We just all brought stuff and we met. And parents, we met very nervously before many games. And we would tailgate and talk about a game or talk about anything. It was the camaraderie of those people, the whole team, the offense, the defense, the people from California and Hawaii and New York. They weren't just from Indiana. There were very few of us from Indiana. I think there were 3 on the team at that time, maybe 4 at that time. And there was a wonderful lady from Chicago. And when I first saw her, I thought, oh, dear God, I have to figure out how I'm going to be her friend, because she would holler, get the quarterback. Did you hear me? Get the quarterback. Not exactly in those words. She was very, very vocal. And I found out her son was on the offense. So if they got the quarterback, then the offense got to go back on the field. So she was always hollered. But after
Sure.
she met me, she hollered at Huff. She'd holler, Huff, get the quarterback. But, she's passed on. But I can still see her in that red sweatsuit that she wore, and her red high-top shoes, and her red scarf, and her red hat. And so you just do those things.
How did you learn to be a puppeteer?
Well, I'm not really the normal puppeteer. I belong to Puppeteers of America, and I've done workshops for them. But I play with puppets versus being a marionette, and I cannot vent. I'm not a ventriloquist. I took classes. I went to Ohio, drove home. I cannot swallow the B and the D. So you know what? I work with little kids, and they don't care if my mouth is moving, because they believe that puppet is actually talking to them. And if that puppet knows their name, oh my goodness, those kids just light up. Even though it's connected on my hand, and even though it's me saying the words, they really believe that that puppet is talking to them.
Who's your favorite puppet? Or do
Well,
you have a favorite?
Well, I have a lot.
Who's in your cart there?
That's Gertie.
Gertie.
Gertie's a goose.
Well, let's see. Let's meet Gertie.
Gertie gets to go with me just about every place. And Gertie has about 25 outfits.
Oh, she does.
Yes. I got on my favorite today. You see, I like to get dressed up.
Well, Gertie, you look very nice today. What are you wearing, Gertie?
Well, I just got on a little green outfit, and I got me a flower. You see that flower? I love flowers. So we put sunflowers and roses and all kinds. I even got dandelions. I like dandelions. There's a book about dandelion, so I use that book.
So, Gertie, what do you do for fun?
I hang out with Mary Jo.
Oh, you do. When did you guys meet?
Well, she found me in a store. And she told him I was too expensive. But I don't know what she did, but she got out a piece of plastic, and I went home with her. So it's wonderful. And you know, I got some cousins out there somewhere, but we lost track. And they don't have me in Ancestry.com. I tell you, I tried.
Now, do you like little children, Gertie?
Oh, yeah. I do. And I tell them stories. Most of the time, I tell them Mary Jo's going to tell stories. You see, she wears hats and glasses and carries them peepers in her pocket and dresses those peepers up. And so I go sit back down while Mary Jo tells that story. But I introduce it, and then I come back out and say, woo! That's a good one.
Now, Mary Jo has other friends besides Gertie. Who are some of her other friends?
Well, I tell you what, I brought Gertie with me because she's my main puppet.
Does Gertie kind of get the show going?
Gertie gets it going and she closes it down.
Oh,
she
okay.
always says hello and she always says goodbye.
Okay.
Once you get that routine, the children, they're not ready to go until she says it's time to go.
Okay.
So if you're really having fun with them and teaching them, you know, the visual literacy is a big deal, and she is visual. And so everything she does connects to literacy with these kids. We sing songs, and that's oral literacy. And so people get into all these big line items that they want to test these kids on instead of doing the things that kids can connect with. You know, these 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, they don't need to be tested. A good early childhood educator knows immediately if a child's having a problem and can guide them. In my lifetime here in Evansville, Easter Seals has been a godsend for us. We would be able to contact them and get children tested there and figure out what a problem might be, and then they would tell us what we could do to help that child in our situation. And if we had a situation that we couldn't handle or wasn't educated enough in, they would guide us through that. So everybody has to work together. Mm-hmm. And that is a key, that everybody works together. But I have puppets. I have frog puppets. I have caterpillar puppets. In fact, I own about 83 puppets on a puppet pole at my house. And if it's a season that in the fall, when the monarchs actually are late summer, early fall, people think they're going to do it in the spring. I tell those early childhood people, you better be reading your science. And now today, look, Google.com. There's no reason anybody doesn't know this stuff. You just ask Google, and Google will give you an answer. Mm-hmm. We didn't have that back in the old days. We did books. In fact, I got 2 of my books with me, and books are outdated. People aren't going to buy books anymore. And the last one I did in 2019. So guess where that went? On the shelf at my house. And I'm actually giving them away. I sent 500 to Houston, Texas, to a puppet guild, and I'll give them away to anybody else that does something with puppets or storytelling, because I'm not going – I closed the store online, basically, so I'm not selling them. I'll just give them away. It's out of my pocket, but they're important. And so, again, Google's there. Pinterest, oh my goodness, these people don't have to have a brain anymore to figure out what to do. Go to Pinterest, and you can figure out and add to what you see there, you know? Mm-hmm.
I know you shared a story. You went to a school or center or something, and there was a teacher that told you, well, this child just not going to engage. It's not going to take part. It's just this child's always off in the corner and doesn't get involved. And you go, that's not going to happen here. That's a challenge, and you can get all these kids going.
If a teacher, and this happens a lot. Here in Evansville, I wrote a grant, and it was with the Indiana Arts Commission. And I wrote it because I've never written a grant, and I'm sitting during COVID, and it went across one of my screens, and I thought, I wonder what that is. And Rivertown Storytellers is a 501c3. So I wrote that grant, and we got $3,000. So we did 21 storytelling events in Evansville through the On My Way Pre-K with Terry Green, and we were at Culver. And a group of the kids that came in at Culver, I knew we were going to have a hard time sitting. But you put a pair of Peepers on your hand, and you just go and talk to that child personally. And I say, I'm so glad you came today. Oh, my goodness, we're going to have a good time. I got some music. You ready? And you got them because you talked to them. And I start every program off with some music. And I have a song called Children Fun, and I wrote the song. And we sing that, but you know what it does? It crosses midline. So when we cross that midline 9 times in that song, we're activating both sides of their brain. And so then they're going to sit for what's coming next because I've got them ready. So doing those kinds of things, and that's what I want teachers to do. Don't just expect because you said sit down, they're going to sit down. Give them a reason to want to sit down. Mm-hmm. And, you know, early childhood field, I got to say this. They use that phrase, crisscross applesauce. Well, you know, I eat applesauce. I don't crisscross applesauce, and I tell them all that. And I'll say, think about what you're saying to them. Just because it rhymes doesn't mean that that's what you should say. And I know where that came from. And so I find just telling the kids to sit on your bottom and roll your legs up works just fine. So that child that teacher told you about, if you're animated, and then I can direct things that direction where that child is, if you've got a whole group of them, but you can direct it right there. Mm-hmm. And I have had teachers say, I'll never forget one in Pennsylvania. She said, I can't believe he sat there. I absolutely cannot believe it. I said, you saw it, didn't you? She said, I don't know how you did that. I said, did you see what I did? I mean, it's common sense for me. It's common sense. Yes.
Now, some of your favorite stories that you tell are kind of different takes on some classics. You got Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You got a new take on that.
Had to take on that. I guess my favorite is the Three Belly Goats Gruff, though, because the kids will look at me like, "What are you saying?" But they don't say a word, and mine happens in a family room. I don't say that it's under a bridge, but when the goats get ready to go across the bridge, that old troll says that the goats are going trip trap across that bridge, and that goat goes, "I'm gonna eat you for lunch." And the first goat says, oh, well, why don't you wait? My brother's coming, and he's right behind me. He might taste better. And so he lets him go. So it's a takeoff on that done in a different way. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, of course, the troll is bucked into the creek, and they have to call 911, and the ambulance comes and picks up this goat. And the kids laugh. It doesn't matter. You say 911, they laugh, picking up a goat. And it's just, again, it's a takeoff, but you can fracture those fairy tales. Mm-hmm. There was a gentleman that wrote one a long, long time ago, and I do it all the time. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating an ice cream cone. Along came a spider and sat down beside her, and she said, hey, big boy, go get your own. And so those things are funny for the kids.
Sure.
You know, but what's happening? You're introducing language. You're introducing all these things. And I have a song called Chicken Fun. Paid my bills. That song paid my bills for a while. And then a professor got a hold of it in Dr. Pam Scheller down in Texas, and she said, oh my gosh, Mary Jo, you've got the left to right correlation, you've got phonological connections, you've got double sets of numbers. And she went on. I said, and I did it for fun. So you see, all of those things, if you know the educational benefit of that fun.
Mm-hmm. What about the chicken story? What is that all about? The chicken fun?
Chicken fun is... chicken 1 and chicken 2, let's all do the chicken chew. And then the kids have the motions that go with that. And we do balk, 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 balk. And we do that repeatedly. It's repeated after each one. And they have to have chicken wings, so they have their thumbs in their armpits.
Mm-hmm.
And they're involved with that. And that one also crosses midline. Everything that we do crosses that midline. And the kids love it. I put a chicken hat on my head. I have chicken socks and chicken shoes and a chicken apron. So I look ridiculous. Seriously, to an adult, I look ridiculous. But to the kids, I don't. It's like, okay. And how do I get all that stuff? Well, somebody sent me an email and said, Mary Jo, there's chicken socks on sale. Da, 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 da. And the lady made me a chicken apron up from Nashville, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And that chicken hat, I was on the highway in Ohio, and I pulled it up online. And this man sold these chicken hats. So unfortunately for me, I bought 100 chicken hats. So then I got to sell the chicken hats. And so I sold them for what they cost me. I don't make any money.
Were you inspired by the chicken dance at the fall festival?
Oh, yeah, that was funny. Anything, the word chicken.
Yes.
And there's an agent that was just on a webinar that I was on, and he loves chickens. He would never publish the book I would love to have published, but I'm going to send him that anyway because he loves chickens.
Now, do the kids, do they make their own puppets sometimes? Do they come up with their own ideas of what they want to see? Or do you?
If you give them that time, if you put the stuff out on the table. Today they have a new word for this. It's called loose parts. There's people making a fortune on the words loose parts. And I get tickled because we had boxes of loose parts. And if you put stuff on a table and let them go, don't do it for them. Don't tell them what to do. Don't tell them what color the marker is. And you give them a shape and you say, we're going to make a puppet today. If you can find anything on this table you want to glue down, we'll glue it on there. And we let them do it. And most of the time for them, I put them on a stick. Versus I have done footy puppets with them, not socks, footy puppets. The footies give better. And but putting a thing on a stick, a bird on a stick, where you can make up anything about a story if the kids put that on a stick, and letting them tell you what that is. Mm-hmm. Now we got language development.
Yeah. So you're learning from the kids too sometimes?
Oh yeah. Sometimes they say things that mom and dad might not have wanted them to say. And I always, when I had so many kids, but I knew every parent, every grandparent, anybody that picked the kids up. So we didn't have video back then, and we didn't have my camera on my phone that I could just real quick. Today, there's a lot of communication between early childhood people and the families because they can put it up on a website, a private website, or a private Facebook place, and they can communicate with the parents some of the fun things that happen. We didn't have that. I had to call them, and I'd have to say, you're not going to believe what Sarah said today, but listen, I got to tell you just so you know. That we now know. And it was, Mama was pregnant, and nobody else knew, but that little girl knew, and she told us. And so the mama said, I guess I'll have to tell the world now. I said, probably because Sarah's in here blasting it. Just those things that, knowing all those parents, and it comes back to you. For instance, 3 weeks ago, I was invited to a 60th birthday party for a lady that worked with me for a long time. Her daughter invited me. Her daughter went to our preschool. I get there, it's way out the country. And the daughter pulls up to this table and she said, I want to introduce this lady to these people that I didn't know. And she said, this was my principal at preschool. And I said, I wasn't a principal, I taught class. She said, I know, but I thought you were. And she looked at me and said, do you still know our school song? I said, well, of course, I wrote it. She said, let's sing it for them, okay? She knew every word to Kinder Country Preschool. She knew every word. And here she is. She's a graduate of Purdue University. I just loved on her. That P word's hard for me to say because I'm from IU. But she's so brilliant and going to be such a good little mama. But here she is an adult, and she remembered that. Another boy at Wesselman Woods, I used to take the kids twice a year. We went in the fall to see how the woods was going to go to sleep. We'd go back in the spring, and I would wake that woods up. And so I did my own talk. I lived in the country. I knew how to do that. So I did that every year. And one year we're walking out and we're singing our school song. We marched. And this tall adult boy was singing that school song and came up behind me. And I looked at him and I said, oh my gosh, Skip Mike, I knew his name. I said it. It was Mike Borkowski, and he knew every word to that song. And the guy that was with him just looked at him like, you're crazy. He said, no, I went to preschool here. See those little shirts? I had a shirt just like that.
They can remember that from preschool.
They can remember that.
Wow, that had to be
it is
very rewarding.
It's an amazing thing. And I had a puppet back then. His name was Varmint. And he was just a cool dude. He wasn't very pretty. He wore wild clothes, but he had a mouth that had a split in it, and you could put a cookie in there. And 3 or 4 people have stopped me over the last years and asked me if I still had that cookie-eating puppet. I still have him, but it was a lady in Virginia that made him for speech people, because you could stick your finger through there and do the up in the roof and down on the bottom thing. Oh. And she retired, and so he's not available anymore. So I try not to show people things that, like Goose is not available. You can't find her with her leather beak and her leather feet anymore.
Is there a favorite story among all the stories that you've told?
Yeah, I used to tell it a lot. It's called the Eensy Weensy Spider, but it's a version. And I heard a gentleman tell this in Jonesboro, Tennessee, in the tent, and I was rolling on the ground. And at that time, I did not know a thing about copyright. Nothing. And so I recorded that story, my version, at Vincennes University actually on a training CD that I did. And then I found out about copyright. So I had to go backtrack that, and then I paid dearly to tell that story. But it's about an eensy weensy spider that, just gets up that spout and gets washed out, and it's just awful. Just should have just stayed home that day. And I've told that for years and years, and it was on the DVD. That one, and I've written a lot of stories, so a lot of my stories are in my books. And right now, I've been in the writing world. I'm going to publish Chicken Fun because it's in a book, and the company will not release that, but I can self-publish it. And so we're going to do Chicken Fun. How I'm going to get it out there, I don't have a clue. But I have a story about the honey jar and the bear, and I tell that all the time. It's just like, who took the cookie from the cookie jar? Well, ours is, who took the honey from the honey jar? Possum took the honey from the honey jar. Who, me? Yeah, you, not me. Then who took the honey from the honey jar? You can add as many forest animals as you want to add. And then at the end, after all the animals said no, Bear said, well, who took the honey from the honey jar? And that crowd always hollers, Bear took the honey from the honey jar. And Bear says, who, me? And they say, yes, you. Yeah, me. I took the honey from the honey jar. Yum, yum. And so I have a bear puppet. And, of course, that bear puppet's talking.
Of course. All right. And you have a Facebook page so people can learn more about your activities, all your materials here. You're very prolific in your storytelling adventure. Definitely. Mary Jo Huff, thank you so much for being my guest on 2 Main Street. You've been inspiring young and old for many years. And who knows what's next when Mary Jo reaches into her Peeper basket? You'll just have to wait and see there. Mary Jo, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I'm David James. This is 2 Main Street, presented by Jeffrey Berger, Berger Wealth Services at Bayard Private Wealth Management.